There are two types of users in microestimating. You see, there's an engineering license and an administrative license. The administrative license is for managing your quotes, estimates, and other system data, but it doesn't give you access to the cycle time calculators to be able to create estimates and quotes. To do this, you'll need to sign in as an engineering user. Let's go ahead and do that now. As an engineering user, the main thing you'll be doing is working on new estimates. To start a simple part estimate, click on Part. We see with the part estimate, we want to start on this left-hand column, starting at the top and working our way down. Let's start with the customer. Double-click on the customer to enter their info. This estimate will be for an existing customer, so let's select them now. You notice that we can update any relevant details as needed, including if we need to adjust our profit percentages for this customer. Now that the customer is selected, click OK. Next, we'll enter the job data. This is automatically set to today's date, and assuming that we'll be starting this estimate on today. Let's go ahead and set a due date for about 1 week. We leave the completion date empty until this quote is completed. We'll want to enter the customer's part number. We can include any additional information here. This status is especially important if it is we're working on multiple quotes, for example, multiple revisions of the same part. There's also additional fields that you can set up for your company. We'll explain more on these later. If your part or your blank materials have an image file, you can attach them here. Next, let's set up the material. The customer said they would like this out of 6061 T4 aluminum. We can also choose the shape of the material, the stock material that we'll be working with. In this case, it's coming from round bar. Our materials data will help us to estimate how much raw stock we will need to produce the parts. Notice as we enter this, a description is populated and other information is calculated. Now at this time we can enter our part quantities so we can provide multiple quotes. Notice how we have extra parts that will be manufactured based on what we think our own internal scrap rate is. Because of this, it has how many extra in order to add up to our total run quantity. If we're supplying the materials, or we got a quote to supply the materials, we can enter the prices here. Notice that these prices can include units. For example, many material suppliers charge by the pound. This makes it easy to convert across the other entries. Now that the first one is entered, we can press the Enter key to fill it all the way across. If we're going to charge the customer shipping or cut charges to get the materials to us, this is where we would enter these. If it is we have our vendors already in the system, we can select them here. And again, you can press Enter to fill it across the board. Now that the information is entered, we can see the cost per piece, and including if we included scrap, we would see the total per piece. We have additional options on this screen. Here we can view the material search, or we can look up materials by their common name, their unified number, ASTM, SAE, and again, further entries that you can supply. You can also sort by material types. We also have the option for codes. This is helpful if we already have materials in our library. We see that my library, we can also select direct buys. For example, if we already keep raw materials in stock. You notice that mine are empty. We can talk more about filling this in later. If it is we need to request a quote for these materials, click the RFQ button. This helps us to go find our vendors that can supply this for us. There's many options here in order to choose how it is you're going to contact your vendors. Next, we can move on to routing. From here, we can choose which departments this part will need to pass through. Let's choose something simple, like our machining center. We notice this is an internal or external process. We're doing this in-house. Double-click on your machining center to enter the details. If we already know our cycle times for this, we can enter them here. Our setup times and our run times. And then we can move straight into calculating our labor rates. But more than likely, you're going to want to use the cycle time calculator. In the cycle time calculator, you can choose which machine you're going to be running against. These are very basic, generic machines. If you'd like to choose a specific machine, you can choose it from your Work Center editor. We'll go into more details on this later. Here you can set your fixture type on this machine. You can also choose the style of machining: single part, split cycle, gang machine, and tombstone. If you have a pallet changer, make sure to check the box. Next, we move on to operation selection. Here you can select the operations that you need to perform on this piece of material to create your part. Let's choose something simple. We'll start with a center drill, a drill, and finally a tap. Microestimating is able to use smart tooling in order to determine what you need to perform each operation. To take advantage of this, start with the last operation, the size of the tap. Let's say it's a 1/2 inch diameter, 20 pitch through hole, 1 inch deep, and we're making 4 of these. With about 2.5 inches between each one. Go ahead and click OK on that. Next, double click on our drill operation. Notice how it chooses the correct drill diameter and the depth of the hole in order to fit that size tap. And same thing again for the center drill. Let's go ahead and add one more operation here. Let's put a face mill. Again, enter your tooling information. And then we're just going to cut a rectangle. And then because this is a finish cut, we can choose what type of finish we would like on it. Now that we've filled out all of our operations, let's go to our layout and see what was happening. We see here it has the cut length for each of the operations, along with the speeds, feeds, and RPM rates for the machine. This gives us our total cut times, our idle times, resulting in our complete cycle time for this part. We can also change the setup hours and enter more values here as needed. For example, this is a very simple part. Maybe we only need half an hour to set this up. Now that we're complete, now that we've finished with our cycle time calculations, we can close this window. Notice all of the information is now populated here. We already have a machining center labor rate, which we can edit from here. This allows us to have a set of defaults that we can choose between when setting up jobs. We can fill in additional information here in order to override the defaults. And you can see all of our data is calculated for each of the quantities. Now that we have all the data for our machining center, we can close this routing, or we can add more parts. Next up, we have engineering. If it is we decide to charge for engineering, we can have a lot of our samples saved here. We can also choose which quantity columns we're going to apply these charges to. Next, let's look at pricing. Here we can choose where our profits and other overheads are applied to. For example, if we're purchasing the materials, we may not charge our SG&A, our profit, or our sales rep commissions. All of our costs are calculated here. And meanwhile, we can edit any of these values here. For example, say at the 50 part quantity, we know we need to get under $5.50 in order to win the job. Rather than editing our cycle times, it's much safer to edit our profits. We can edit these numbers until we find something that'll make sure we win this job. There's other data here that we can talk about in another video. Now that you're completed, let's save this estimate. This estimate is now complete. Let's also set an activity. We're going to notify our sales staff to follow up. Since this is Friday, let's set the follow-up for Monday. Now I notice we only have a single user in the system. If you have multiple users in this system, their names would be listed here, and you can tie them directly to that particular user.